what I do, what I do, da da do, da da do.
An explosion of written and artistic creativity, a time of social awareness and enlightenment among black people. The Harlem Renaissance, originally known as the New Negro Movement, began after the First World War and lasted until the middle of the 1930s Depression.
One of the things that's burbling up from the streets is jazz. And what's not to like? It is the spectacular efflorescence. I mean, jazz is not a New York phenomenon, but in the 20s, black musicians come pouring into Harlem. You're getting to hear the most spectacularly fascinating, exciting music that the country had ever produced.
This was where a European, when Ravel came here, where did he want to go? He told George Gershwin, take me to Harlem, 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 Harlem.
The mere idea of you, the longing here for you. You'll never know how slow the moments go till I'm near to you. I see your face in every flower, your eyes and stars above. It's just the thought of you, the very thought of you, my love. I see your face in every flower, your eyes and stars above. It's just the thought of you, the very thought of you, my love.
In the 1920s, African American culture began to flourish in Harlem, New York. It redefined African American expression in literature, art, music, dance, and social commentary. African Americans were encouraged to celebrate their heritage. Never before had so many Americans read the thoughts of African American and embraced the African American community's productions, expressions, and style. This movement became known as the Harlem Renaissance, and it transformed African American identity and history.
The Harlem Renaissance was an extraordinary time period. A huge cultural revolution took place in only 50 blocks of New York City. There were hundreds of thousands of African Americans living there during this time, and their daily lives can tell us a lot about this period.
Gangs were not very common in Harlem during the 1920s. Instead, there were illegal gambling areas. Of the crimes that did happen, most were done by Italian, Jewish, and Irish gangsters. Restaurants and clubs were a big part of Harlem's culture. One of the most popular places to go was Ed Small's Paradise, which was located on the southwest corner of 135th Street. It was said that Ed Small's Paradise's dance floor would be so crowded that each person would only have a dime's worth of space while dancing.
Every time period and area of the world has its own slang and ways of speaking that separate it from other time periods or places. 1920s Harlem is no exception. Some of the phrases that were said back then have stood the test of time and are still used today. Walking down the streets of Harlem in the peak of this period, you would hear people shout, "For crying out loud," if they dropped their wallet in the sewer. Friends would get together at the local theater, smoke a ciggy, and fawn over the doll singing on stage. Store owners would tell those no-good kids from the hood to beat it. Harlem witnessed an abundance of houses intended for white workers. As time went on, the developers began to start selling to African Americans in need of housing. New York was under a redevelopment as well, which pushed many black Americans out of downtown New York, forcing them into the Harlem area. Due to these issues, Harlem quickly filled with African American people. It is estimated that more than 5,000 people lived on a single block. There are about 250,000 citizens total in Harlem, all confined to an area only 50 blocks long and 8 blocks wide. There were so many people that some were forced to sleep in shifts. As Harlem began filling up, prices began to rise dramatically. A phenomenon known as the rent parties began. These were parties held on weekends with the goal of raising enough money to pay the landlord, because many residents could not pay rent. Families often split into sections and lived in very small apartments in order to fit the massive amount of people.
Jobs in Harlem were few and far between for people. In addition, jobs were hard to keep for more than 2 to 3 years, and it would take many months to find new jobs. As a result, many people were poor in Harlem. Many people wanted to pursue their dreams of becoming an actor, an artist, a writer, or anything they thought they could become, so professionals weren't concentrated in a single field. Even though many people wanted to pursue their dream job, the reality was that very few did, and even fewer were successful at it. Since Harlem itself was not full of corporate businesses, many people worked in specialized jobs or low-paying maintenance jobs. Harlem was a very religious area and had a focus on community. Not everyone knew each other, but groups of people would get together and talk or do activities. There were hundreds of churches in the Harlem area at this time. Because of the strong cultural bonds in the communities Harlem had, it became known as the Negro capital of America. People would seek out entertainment as an escape from their lives at home.
Residents of Harlem lived in a world with unique cultural and social opportunities. The impressive access to art mediums, ranging from everything from jazz to dance, provided many Harlemites with unique and diverse ways to entertain themselves. The birth of jazz in Harlem is one of the most famous of these many art forms. However, normal Harlemites were not able to see the biggest names in jazz, including Billie Holiday and Duke Ellington, because they performed a white-only club, which was segregated and off-limits to the majority of Harlem residents. Instead, many locals would put on their best Sunday clothes and go to a wide range of integrated music clubs where they could dance along to the earliest forms of shuffle and eventually jazz. The Apollo Theater and the Savoy Ballroom were just two of the places where normal Harlem residents could just sit back, relax, and enjoy the music. In addition to music, there were many other cultural aspects of Harlem that residents could enjoy. The theater was a common place to go, where musicals and plays dealt with topics such as the struggle between blacks and whites and life in Africa. Dance theater was also very common and quite popular in Harlem. Something else worth mentioning about Harlem is the intense sense of community that can be found. People always were socializing, whether it be at rent parties or at the numerous clubs and organizations that operated from this area. There was a real sense of community that added to an already stellar neighborhood.
The normal lives of Harlemites during the era of the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s show just how extraordinary this time period was. An unprecedented number of people flocked to this area of New York, and with them brought a variety of cultures that all blended together to form many things we all know today.